This is a CBC podcast.
Missing and Murdered: Who Killed Alberta Williams is a podcast that delves into the unsolved cold case of a young Indigenous woman. Alberta Williams was murdered in northern British Columbia 27 years ago. I'm Connie Walker. Join me as I track down people never interviewed by police and others who have been too afraid to speak out until now. Go to cbc.ca/Who Killed Alberta Williams for more. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app.
The first of two class action lawsuits against Canada's major junior hockey leagues has taken another step closer to reality. Lawyers argue players are employees and they deserve to be paid at least minimum wage. In the meantime, the BC government has just exempted the province's 6 Western Hockey League teams from the need to pay minimum wage, including the Vancouver Giants and Victoria Royals. But first, we'd like to hear from you. Do you think junior athletes are employees and should be paid at least minimum wage? If you played junior sports, how did you make ends meet? Call us toll-free across the province. The number is 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, we're at 604-669-3733. From your cell phone at star or pound 690. Tweet us at BC Almanac or email us almanac@cbc.ca. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by the lawyer leading the effort of filing these class action lawsuits. But first, for an academic's thoughts on this case, I spoke to Ken Thornycroft, a professor of law and employment relations at the University of Victoria's Gustafson School of Business.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think of the BC government's decision to exempt Western Hockey League teams from paying their players at least minimum wage?
Well, the effect of the exemption, as you point out, is to eliminate the requirement for the teams to pay minimum wage and all other provisions of the Employment Standards Act. I think it's important to note, though, that the decision presupposes, in some sense, that the players are actually employees. If, in fact, the players are not employees, the exemption is sort of a moot point. I think, in my mind, what might have been driving this decision more than anything else was a desire to avoid potentially years of litigation over the question of whether or not these players are or are not employees. If they are employees, then the exemption is essentially taking away vested rights that the players would otherwise have under the Act. If the players are not employees, then the exemption is really just confirming the status quo.
So what determines whether a player is an employee and should be paid minimum wage?
Well, this is where it gets very, very difficult. If you look at the definition of employee in the Employment Standards Act itself, it's not particularly helpful. It talks about a person receiving wages for work performed. It talks about work normally performed by an employee. It talks about people being trained for an employer's business. So it's not particularly helpful. You can look to common law provisions and their test for whether somebody is an employee is, what were the intentions of the parties when they entered into a contract, who is providing the tools and equipment to do the work, is the person an independent contractor sort of in business for themselves. So it's an area that is a little bit gray. I think one of the things, though, is are these players working, or are they essentially student athletes who are engaged in playing hockey as other athletes are engaged in other sports with a view to sort of developing their future potential, maybe for a professional career, or just because they simply enjoy the game and it's sort of a supplementary part of their existence as students. And I suppose that might be the fundamental question if this case ever were to be litigated.
Here in Vancouver, the Giants have quite a large profile. They charge ticket prices $19.50 to $40 per game. If you want to get a season's ticket, that ranges from $576 to $1,152. So shouldn't they be able to pay their players at least minimum wage?
I don't know. I'm not privy to the financial records of the teams. It's possible that some teams would be able to pay. It's possible that other teams would be challenged by that. But insofar as the law is concerned, whether or not the sort of nominal employer has the ability to pay is not really the question. I liken this case in some sense to college athletes. So you look at a college athlete who generally are a little bit older than the players who would be in the WHL, but they receive scholarships. In the United States, these scholarships have very significant value. If you're at a private university, the value of that scholarship is probably in the order of nearly $100,000 US per year at elite private schools. And the players are playing a sport, whether it's basketball or football or some other Division I sport, and the teams obviously charge fees for people to come to the game for tickets. Many of these schools have very, very significant television revenue. They often have their own broadcast networks. You look at the Final Four in the basketball tournament, very, very large TV ratings, millions and millions of dollars are changing hands, and yet in the United States, college athletes have been ruled not to be employees. They're athletes. And so the question then becomes, are these players more like sort of university athletes that are receiving some benefits in exchange for, playing their sport, or are they truly employees and it's an employment relationship and they should be paid as such?
Ken, thank you so much. Good to talk with you today.
Thank you very kindly.
That's Ken Thornycroft. He's a professor of law and employment relations at the University of Victoria's Gustafson School of Business. Do you think junior athletes are employees and should be paid at least the minimum wage? If you played junior sports, how did you make ends meet? I'll give you the numbers once again to call. 1-800-825-5950 in Metro Vancouver. We're at 604-669-3733. From your cell phone, star or pound 690. Send us a tweet if you like, at BC Almanac. Joining us now is the lawyer who is putting together this class action lawsuit, Ted Charney. He's a class action lawyer and a senior partner of Charney Lawyers in Toronto. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Gloria.
So what do you think of BC granting this exemption for Western Hockey League teams?
It's unfortunate. I agree with Professor Thornycroft that they saw the writing on the wall in terms of when this case gets to court, it's likely that the judge who hears all the evidence will decide that major junior hockey players are employees. That's what the real motivation was behind the commissioner of the Western Hockey League lobbying the government to exempt the players. There's no other reason to exempt them unless the league is afraid that they're going to be found to be employees in court. Otherwise, they should just have litigated the case in court. And if they're right that the players are not employees, then they'll win in court, and that'll be the end of it. But instead of having this case litigated the way issues are normally litigated in this country, they went around the litigation and approached the government and lobbied them directly. I've seen the Freedom of Information documents, and I can tell you that the main reason why the league thought that the players should be exempted was because of the so-called financial implications for the operation of the teams in British Columbia if we were to succeed in court and get a finding that they're employees. The entire lobbying effort was predicated on how all of the teams would be out of business if the class action were to succeed.
Ted, what sparked your efforts to put together this class action lawsuit in the first place?
We were approached by some of the former players, and I knew nothing about major junior hockey when we were approached. Our reputation is for doing class actions. We don't have any special expertise in hockey. But when these players told me about how much money they made playing hockey for the 4 years that they were in the league, I was just shocked. Back in 2013-14, before we started this case, the players were making $50 a week in the OHL, $35 a week in what we call the Q, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and around somewhere between $35 and $55 a week in the teams in the Western Hockey League. And I just couldn't understand it. I looked into it a little more, and I found out that since the 1970s, the standard player agreement has provided for wages at the same level, $50 a week. Sometimes it's called an allowance in the standard player agreement. Other times it's actually called wages, depending on which league you look at. And they've been paying the same amount for the last 40 years. And every 2 weeks the kids get a check. They call it a paycheck. Sometimes they get T4s, sometimes they get records of employment. For their overage year in the Quebec League, they're actually called employees, even though they play on the same lines as the kids that are 16, 17, and 18. They get drafted into the NHL at the age of 18, and they go back to the league and play another 2 years in the league, even though they're now professional hockey players in the NHL under contract. So I just found the whole thing to be very confusing, and then we tried to figure out how much the revenues are for these leagues, and whether they really are making any money, or are they an altruistic charity who is there just to develop these young men into fine young players, which is the position the leagues take, which I don't accept for 1 minute. I think they're in the business of making money, and that's why these players are entitled to be paid. So we figured out that the revenues that are being generated across the three leagues are in the range of about $200 million a year. And we figured out that through the NHL contracts and the Sportsnet contracts, there's revenue sharing that goes on where each team receives about $350,000 a year amongst the 60 teams in the three leagues. And, some teams make more money than others, but even the smallest teams have revenues in the range of $2 million a year. And what the teams will tell you and the commissioner will tell you is that they always break even or slightly lose money, but this is part of their business model. Even the hitmen probably just break even though they might have revenues of $50 million a year. It's just part of their business model. It's accounting. But the real question is why can't they pay minimum wage? It's $300,000 a year per team at the most. They've got a revenue sharing agreement which generates $350,000 a year per team. So if they're right, and that is some of the smaller teams can't afford it, well, some of the bigger teams could get less of that revenue sharing income. They probably wouldn't miss it at all. And it could go to some of the smaller teams. And there's other ways to do this. But, the reality is the way the league promotes their product, their marketing materials, tout the league as having 8,400,000 spectators who pay for tickets to attend the games, more than all of the other professional leagues in Canada, including the NHL, the CFL, and others, more than all of them all combined. That's the kind of business entity we're talking about here, who comes to the BC government and to the Labour Minister, whose riding happens to be the same riding as the Prince George Cougars are in, and tells them, please give us an exemption from paying minimum wage because we can't afford to pay it.
Okay, I'm going to get back to you in just a couple of minutes, Ted, but right now we have Ron Robison on the line now. We talk about this legal action being taken against all the junior hockey leagues. The BC government, as we pointed out, specifically made an exemption for the province's Western Hockey League teams. Ron Robison, the commissioner of the Western Hockey League, is on the line with us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Gloria.
I'll start by getting you to react to this email we just received from one of our listeners. Perry writes, junior hockey is a for-profit business. The players should receive minimum wage. So, Ron, why don't you think WHL teams should pay players minimum wage?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the players registered in the Western Hockey League and in the Canadian Hockey League are registered Canadian amateur hockey players. We are the top level of the amateur hockey system. And what we're dealing with here is trying to preserve these opportunities for players to play at the top level of the amateur hockey system, to do so for other levels of junior hockey and the amateur hockey system, as well as the amateur sports system in Canada overall.
So how are the players compensated?
The players receive extensive benefits for playing in the league. The ownership throughout the Canadian Hockey League and the Western Hockey League invests heavily in the player experience. We provide all travel expenses, room and board, equipment and supplies, education, and a wide range of support services, including the top caliber of coaching, medical and professional support for the players. All of the necessary expenses they require to play at our level are taken care of. The stipend or the allowance that was referred to earlier is simply to cover any out-of-pocket expenses the player may have above and beyond the expenses that we provide.
Well, you heard Ted Charney, the lawyer, saying a few moments ago, more than 8 million people across this country pay for tickets to watch this. These leagues are run like businesses. Why shouldn't the players get a cut?
Well, the franchises and the financial position of the of the teams are certainly not being portrayed fairly at all. These franchises are not a profitable franchise. The industry is not profitable. The information that's been stated relative to the financial positions and operating budgets of the teams are completely inaccurate, and franchise values are grossly overstated. So I think it's a distorted message to send. The most important thing is that we're trying to preserve these opportunities for these young players to play in leagues like the Western Hockey League, continue to offer a world-class experience. We're fully committed to doing that, and the only way to preserve that really is to provide exemptions, and we really commend the government of BC for taking this step.
Now, if the teams aren't profitable, how come they're still going?
Well, they continue to go because ownership is committed to making sure that these opportunities are still available despite challenges from a standpoint of operating those teams on it. And this is something that other levels of hockey will indicate to you as well, and we are no exception. The operating expenses of operating a Western Hockey League team are very, very significant, particularly when you consider our travel, equipment today, and the operating costs of our teams up against the revenues that our teams receive. It's a very challenging business model for all of our WHL clubs.
Ron Robison, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's Ron Robison, Commissioner of the Western Hockey League. And back to Ted Charney now, a class action lawyer and senior partner of Charney Lawyers in Toronto. He's taken the lead in this class action lawsuit. Ted, what do you make of what you just heard?
Well, I've heard it before, and I haven't heard anything new, but what I can tell you is this. We brought a court application in Calgary last week in the WHL class action, seeking the court to make an order requiring the Western Hockey League and all of its franchise teams to produce their financial statements and tax returns and their revenue sharing agreements with the NHL and with Sportsnet, Rogers Sportsnet, and so on. And the defendants opposed the motion. They're not prepared to produce any of their financial documentation, and we're waiting to hear back from the judge as to what his decision will be. So I think soon enough we may be able to understand whether or not the commissioner's statement about us having the numbers inaccurate will become much clearer in the very near future. It's unfortunate that the leagues have not been prepared to produce this information voluntarily, and in fact they opposed it last week. So what I have to say about this is that the numbers that I said to you earlier are right from the league's own marketing materials and from their own financial statements from the teams that we have. There's nothing about the numbers that I said that is wrong. There are 8 million to close to 9 million in some years spectators that pay tickets to see these games. And it is a going concern business. The other thing maybe I should suggest to you is that don't forget, the league is the feeder league for the NHL. It's the main source of talent for the National Hockey League. I don't think anyone's going to argue that the National Hockey League has plenty of revenues and plenty of assets, and I don't think the NHL is going to let the Western Hockey League teams get into trouble financially because they won't have their prospects coming through to the NHL. I mean, you have to understand that it's interconnected. The leagues in the major junior level are directly connected to the NHL. They're the farm teams. And also the franchises in the leagues need each other because they're providing a product that's called entertainment. The players are the entertainers. And you need teams to play against, and you need to have competitive play. Otherwise, no one's going to go to the games. So the prospects that these teams are not going to be around is just not realistic because you won't have a league without them, and the NHL won't have a farm system without them. So,
Ted, I appreciate that you've got more to add here, but I really want to bring in some of our listeners to the conversation. Al is on the line from Prince George. Al, welcome.
Hi there.
Your thoughts on whether the players should be paid at least minimum wage?
Well, my concerns are even greater than them being paid minimum wage, but it really, as a 5-year parent of a WHL player, and knowing how much money the boys have got over the years, and very often at times they are given a kangaroo-type court fines where they lose their pay anyway to fines for various items taking place on a bus or on the ice surface. So the money is absolutely ridiculous, and it's not appropriate. But even more than that, my son, for example, had a serious concussion injury and set out. It was 1 year from his last game played to the next game played. He had to sit out for a year. The medical attention which he was given was at our expense. For concussions, the options that were out there, for example, we pursued support from the same doctor that worked on Sidney Crosby. We had to pay out of pocket for that. The league wouldn't acknowledge that worked, even though Sidney Crosby acknowledges that it worked.
Now, Al, you just heard a few moments ago Ron Robison, the commissioner of the Western Hockey League, saying we take care of the medical needs of the players, we take care of the education along the way. What went through your mind?
We had to pay out of pocket because it wasn't accepted medical treatment for a concussion. The league, as I understand, supports medical concussion. From what we could get was stay at home and stay in the dark, and that doesn't cost them anything. And so I was very frustrated and very upset with the fact that these costs were not covered, and we covered out of pocket our own transportation to travel the 800 kilometers for assistance and to stay there.
So and we talk about some of these players do go on to play in the NHL. They get some fat contracts, but the majority do not. How is your son, and how is he doing now?
My son struggles with his injury today, and he is a changed young man, which is another irritation of mine, is they talk about paying for services for quality coaches. The coaches, or not all of them, there's some great coaches out there, but there are a large majority of old school coaches that call these boys young men so that they can abuse them at a higher level, that they can beat them down mentally and emotionally, and that happens on a regular basis. I love hockey. I loved watching my son play hockey, and unfortunately over the last few years of him being in the league, and seeing this stuff, it is very, very frustrating for me, and I have an awful feeling about the fact that my son was a hockey player. My son told me in his second year in the WHL that, Dad, I can work for any boss. I said, what are you talking about? He says, I can work for any boss, any job, anywhere. And I says, why? He says, there's no boss that can beat on me more than a hockey coach has beat on me. So they have trained me to be able to work for anyone. So that's coming from a boy who's very optimistic, very wanted to play at an extremely high level. He played at the U17 challenge, which is the top players in Canada playing that. And he had his dreams, and he was willing to work hard for them. And he, because of the system, he struggled, and I think in the end felt unsupported. His education suffered because of it. They talk about a great education package, and his education suffered for it. He is now taking in his second semester of upgrading so that he has a high school diploma, but his marks were not high enough to move on to a career choice that he was looking for. So
Al, I'm sorry to jump in here. We're going to have to wrap up the conversation, and you've made some incredible points. You painted a really sad story about how much your family has invested in the league and where your son's at now. I really appreciate you calling through. And Ted Charney, I imagine that you've heard a fair share of those types of stories.
Yes, we have.
So what happens now with your case, I mean?
Well, we have a certification hearing in Calgary for the week of February 6, 2017, and we have the same hearing in Toronto at the end of March 2017. And the parties now are gearing up for the certification hearings. If the case gets certified as a class action, then it'll proceed forward to trial, and we'll have a judge decide whether or not the players are in fact employees.
How do you think the case of American college football players might affect your case of Canadian junior hockey players?
Well, the defendants here in this case take the position that the players are amateur student athletes. And you heard the professor talk about NCAA athletes. But the difficulty here is you don't have the Vancouver Giants are not the University of Vancouver Giants. The kids are not going to university and then playing on one of the collegiate teams while they attend university. The players are playing for major sports enterprises who are in the business of earning profits from their revenues, and the players are not enrolled in the university while they're playing hockey, nor are the teams a university. So the analogy really doesn't work, but it's the best they've got because they have to come up with some way of characterizing the players to avoid the designation as employees. And so that's where they're headed, but we don't think it's analogous at all.
We certainly appreciate your time today, and we will be following your class action process with great interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria.
That's Ted Charney. He's a class action lawyer and senior partner of Charney Lawyers in Toronto. Another change is coming to our TV viewing landscape. This week, reports that the giant CBS network in the U.S. has signed a deal with Google to provide content to a new TV subscription service under the YouTube brand, and that's going to launch early next year. What does that mean to you? How do you navigate all of the choices out there in terms of accessing TV content? We would love to hear from you. What do you see as the future for cable television? And do you use conventional cable, streaming services? Call us around the province. The number toll-free is 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, we're at 604-669-3733. From your cell phone, star or pound 690. Tweet us at BC Almanac or email us almanac@cbc.ca. Our guest for today's discussion is Greg O'Brien. He's editor and publisher of CART.ca. That's CARTT, as in cable, radio, television, and telecom. Greg truly has his finger on the pulse of these ever-changing industries. We're glad he was able to join us from our CBC Hamilton studio. Welcome, Greg.
Good afternoon.
So let's start with this CBS-Google partnership. How significant is that?
Well, it's a big deal because it effectively is going to make Google's YouTube kind of a virtual cable operator. CBS is the first big broadcaster out of Fox and ABC. Will probably come after that. But they're the first one to sort of make the jump in with Google to, like I said, make YouTube all of a sudden a cable operator in competition with the likes of Comcast and Cox down in the States. So it's a pretty big deal.
How would you describe the TV viewing or video streaming landscape today? If someone just says, so what's it like there in Canada? What would you say?
Well, it's consolidated among a bunch of companies, but it's also massively fragmented at the same time. So you've got Shaw and Rogers, Bell, sort of, in Quebec, Quebecor controlling things pretty well from distribution as well as media. But you've got all sorts of online players, of course, led by the big dog Netflix, that are also in there, all vying for people's time to watch TV. So, it's pretty well consolidated up here, but there's just a massive amount of competition out there for people's eyeballs, basically.
Yeah. Are there too many options?
For me, there's too many. It's hard to keep track of them all. I mean, and I do it for a living. You've got Facebook getting into entertainment content, and there's just and video is just leading everybody nowadays. There's so much there to attract your attention. You ride the train 10 years ago, and people were reading newspapers and books, and you ride the train now, and most likely, people are looking at their phones watching video.
Are all these options sustainable, do you think? I mean, we saw Show Me around for a very short time. That didn't last. Do you see anything else sort of going by the wayside?
Well, it's hard to say they're all sustainable. You really can't see that. They recently had MIPCOM in Cannes, France, which is the TV market where the producers go and sell their TV shows every year. And 10 years ago, you had less than 200 English language TV shows available for sale. Now this year there were over 400. And they're available for sale to Bell Media, CTV, Global, whoever wants to take it in this market, but they're also for sale globally to Netflix and Hulu, and anybody else who wants to have it. So, they call it peak TV right now, because there are so many good options and great shows out there, but there's still only 24 hours in a day. People still have to go to work.
Oh, there is that. There is that. Well, let's hear from some of our listeners and see how they're navigating all of these options. John is on the line from Kelowna. Hi there, John.
Hey, how you doing, Gloria?
I'm very well. So how do you watch TV?
Okay, so I'm 32, and so I'm at the top end of a millennial market. And in most aspects, I'll watch television while getting ready for work or getting up in the morning. And primarily that'll be either something that I've downloaded from the night before, such as like The Daily Show, which I won't stay up for because it's too late, or it'll be something on CBC on just the television in the kitchen. That's the most that I do for watching television on a TV set. Other than that, if it's on a TV set, I've downloaded it and from a torrent website or streamed from PlayStation 4 services like through an app like Netflix. And that is actually the main way how any millennial today gets their data and their television entertainment. They don't want to pay for it. They will go see stuff like in the theaters if they hear it's good. But primarily, my age group doesn't care to pay for anything. And yeah, like why would you, right? It's free. So we're basically the day and age of pirates. And the only way that I think that Warner Brothers or Netflix, anybody that's trying to capitalize on this type of market still, is they have to get it into apps where you can stream it and you pay, say, a monthly fee for that streaming services. And it's still today with our telecommunications corporations that are putting, certain limits to our restrictions of how much we can stream and how much we will pay for it. And that's still where it comes down to, just getting one bill a month, which is pretty much your internet bill.
John, so good to hear from you. I mean, it's a really interesting points you brought up there. Greg, over to you. Let's just start with the free content. You don't have to be a millennial to not like to pay for stuff. I mean, I think we all kind of feel that way. But what about the factor of, for example, illegal ways to access content? Just download a movie illegally instead of paying for it.
Well, there's dozens of ways to do that. You have to sacrifice a few things. Your computer might become infected with spyware and a few other things. Adware, all that sort of stuff. And when you go to those sites, they're up someday, they're down the next day, because there's a lot of digital, cyber warfare going on out there right now. Netflix has cut Canadians off from being able to access the U.S. catalog, for example. And they've done that in other countries around the world. France, people in France can't access the U.S. catalog as well because they've cut off the ways that you can pay from outside. The problem with getting content for free is that it's not free to make. People are huge fans of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones costs between $10 and $20 million an hour to make. There's a reason why the content is as good as it is. Should rates be cheaper? Maybe they should be cheaper. But the way it's fragmenting right now, you've got your cable bill, you've got your internet bill, whatever. Say your internet bill is $50 a month. And then you pay $10 a month more for Netflix. And then you pay $10 a month more for Hulu. And then you pay $10 a month more for Crave. And, then you pay so much for sports if you're a sports fan. On top of that, pretty quickly, you're past what you were paying for your old cable bill years ago.
Yeah, good point. We have a tweet just in now from Always Votes, who writes, "My daughter was offered basic cable TV by Shaw for $15 for 6 months. We'll throw in a few movie channels. She got no movie channels." Okay, that's his tweet. And Justin's on the line from Vancouver. Hi, Justin. Welcome.
Hi.
How do you navigate this brave new world of video options?
Well, there's so much educational stuff on YouTube, which is really good, and plus movies. Then there are lots of free places where you can get as many as 600 TV stations and then a bunch of radio stuff thrown in and video stations. And one is called FrostWire, and the other one's called Watch TV Live, and there's another one called Film On. They're all the same, those three. The FrostWire and the Watch TV Live are Android apps. And although it's a lot of older stuff like it's got I Love Lucy, and it's got old San Francisco, Streets of San Francisco. There are some newer things on there, and there's a lot of British TV. And it's just enough for, in fact, it's almost too much.
Okay,
You'll end up watching too much TV.
Well, that's what Greg was just saying. There's still only 24 hours in the day, and most of us have to work for some of those hours at least. Justin, thank you so much. And let me put the numbers out there once again. We'd love to hear from more of you, how you watch television, what you watch, what do you see as the future for cable, conventional cable TV. Around the province, the number to call, 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. From your cell phone, star or pound 690. Tweet us at BC Almanac or email us almanac@cbc.ca. I mean, Greg, we've just been hearing, I use this service, I go on this, I get some free stuff here. How do you know? How do you know where to start? Is it just trial and error, word of mouth? Is there sort of a central site that you can access your options?
Well, as I tell people, you just start with Dr. Google and ask him. That will give you a list, an endless list of places to get TV. You can go on Reddit and all sorts of other places that'll show you how to get television, whether it's, legal, illegal, or somewhere in between. The last fellow who was talking, it sounded, I've heard of Film On. I'm not sure about the other ones, but those, not every place where you get free TV it's not, against the law. Nobody's stealing copyright. Some of that stuff is just free. It's there and ad supported, and they're offering some really older shows that have kind of run their course in the regular stream, and you're able to pick them up if that's if that's the type of thing you're into.
I Love Lucy.
Exactly.
There you go. We have a tweet from Lydia who writes, streaming, occasional rented DVD, cut cable 6 years ago, could no longer stand obnoxious and loud ads, and programming was mostly crap. It's kind of funny, once you stop, when you use your PVR or you're on Netflix and you get used to watching content without ads, it's amazing how quickly annoying they become.
It's true. But I mean, there's two ways to pay for content: subscriptions or advertising. And the advertising is getting more pervasive out there, even among the streamers. And YouTube has those pop-up banner ads, and they have pre-roll and post-roll ads and things like that. Advertisement's not going to go away, but I do agree that when you're watching certain, it's really hard to watch a movie on certain channels when there are so many ad interruptions, and that's something that the industry has not yet learned to best deal with. They're moving certain ways to try and make the ads better, to target the ads to to the right people, so that certain people who have they know who have recently had or have young children, they'll send a minivan ad to that home, but people who are older, they'll send a sedan ad to that home, paid for by the same company. There's lots of different experimentation to make advertising better, because it's not going away. Something, that's what pays the freight for most of these things.
We have an email in from Jack who writes, I like to watch CBC online, but lately the site is so slow loading the shows that I can't be bothered to watch it. Why is it slow loading? Why is it so slow loading? So, I mean, that is an issue when you're streaming on certain sites, isn't it? Just in terms of the technology keeping up with the speed of the content.
Well, sure, and it's so much more complicated now. Like, you used to be able to, in the dawn of TV, there was nothing between your rabbit ears and the TV transmitter except air. But if you're streaming shows, boy, oh boy, there are so many things that could interfere with your signal. If you're watching online, your neighbor's blender can mess up, certain things. A squirrel can chew through your line. Your router could be slow because it's full of dust. There are so many things that could slow down your video viewing experience online, and it's really hard for the producers or even CBC to figure out what's going on sometimes.
We have more listeners ready to chat. Trevor's on the line from Burnaby. Hi there, Trevor. Welcome. How do you navigate this world of video options?
Hi, Gloria. I pay for my cable at home. I have a digital cable box, and we also have a video game console that you can stream Netflix through, and we pay for that as well. And when I rent movies, I actually pay for them. I've never, ever illegally downloaded movies or done any pirating. Main reasons why, because it's illegal, but I work in the film business, so I would be basically just stealing from myself if I'm not paying for this content and, putting money into the pockets of my fellow film brothers and sisters.
Amen.
Nicely put. Trevor, thank you very much. I mean, you get his point, don't you, Greg? It's like, well, I'm sort of cutting off my future here at the knees if I'm going to be pirating content.
Well, and I'm the same way. I mean, I produce a newsletter for the industry, and I charge a subscription for it. So I don't pirate content because I want people to pay for my content. I don't think that it's right to charge a subscription and then go backdoor on and try and get content for free. And the companies are coming out with better and better technology all the time that makes it easier. Last year, my wife wanted to get rid of our cable box until my provider, which is Cogeco Cable, introduced a TiVo box, which essentially brings a lot of things into the one cable box. But what it did is also it brought Netflix onto that box. So we can toggle back and forth between our regular cable and Netflix and YouTube for that matter as well, without ever changing devices or having to unhook anything or turn on an Apple TV or turn on go to the other room where the video game console is, which is what we had to do in the past. It's that one box has changed a lot of things, and now my wife doesn't want to get rid of cable.
Uh-huh. Well, at least you don't have to rewind the cassettes anymore, right? Before you take them back to the video store.
Yeah.
Bruce is on the line from Vancouver. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, Gloria.
How do you watch TV?
Well, here's a little story. We were with one of the large providers, and they put our bill up about 50% when our special deal ended. So I called them up, and usually they cave when you threaten to cancel, but they didn't. So I said, great, I'll have to cancel. So I did that, and then I had to figure out what to do. So what I did was I got a Roku...
They called your bluff.
They did.
Okay.
They did. So I got a Roku streaming stick, and now we use that exclusively, and we use, well, not exclusively, because we also use over-the-air television. People don't know this necessarily, but in the Lower Mainland, you can get about 10 or 12 channels of HD quality over the air for free. So that, in combination with the streaming stick and an UMA box for my phone, for my landline, means my bill is $50 a month.
Oh my goodness. It sounds like you're talking another language. Roku here, UMA there, all these things. How do you keep up?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention. I had no choice. Once I pulled the plug, my wife said, great, what are we going to do now? And so I had to go figure it out. But really, a little streaming stick just plugs into the HDMI port. You don't have to do anything. And the antenna was literally just hooking up an HD antenna, which is just like a regular antenna. And all you have to do is, on the same remote, you go back and forth. So I can get CBC or Global or whatever, and YouTube and Netflix, and it's $50 a month.
Wow.
And I bet you your HD is a lot better.
Yeah, people have trouble believing that, but you're absolutely correct. The HD quality broadcasts are significantly better than what you get over your cable television.
Yeah, it's usually between 5 to 8 times the quality because when HD signal's sent through the cable system, it's compressed, so it loses some of the quality that you would pick up over the air. And all the stuff that you've done is a great way to cut your bill. I mean, there's a Roku, there's Chromecast, there's Boxee, there's a bunch of other options to make your TV into a smart TV, unless you already have a smart TV. And people do forget about over-the-air. I'm guilty of that myself. There's still great over-the-air options. Here in Hamilton, there's a ton of signals that come in from Toronto and Buffalo. And, there's even a company in Ottawa called Tableau TV that'll basically deliver over-the-air TV to your tablet. There's all sorts of experimentation going on, so kudos to you for doing all that stuff.
Well, thank you very much. Well, here you go. I've had no trouble, or I've had big trouble trying to convince anybody to do it. But hey, I'm a baby boomer. I figured it out. If I can, they can too.
Bruce, thank you so much for calling. We have Mike who's just sent us an email. He writes, I gave up. I have 3 to 4 shows I PVR, and I watch when I get to it. I started building furniture in my downtime. I make extra money with the radio on. Well, it's great to have you listening, Mike. Thank you very much. To Victoria now. Bill's on the line. Hi there, Bill.
Hi.
How do you watch TV?
Well, we have Shaw cable and internet. Generally speaking, we watch TV only because it's convenient and the picture quality is better. The big problem is there's very little on. There's hundreds of channels and nothing on. It's just like the song. if we also watch via the internet, use Netflix, stream, do all the rest of the stuff, and we're really getting to the point where we want to disconnect our Shaw cable service, our TV service, because it's become, it's just, there's not much out there anymore. It's just not worth I think it's combined cost of $200 a month for cable and internet, and it's just, it's just too much money.
Bill, thank you very much. Greg, it is a lot of money, and as you say, it's so fragmented, just having, now they're looking at getting special bundles, but you feel like you're kind of missing out when you choose this channel and not the other one, or you want to watch that particular game, and you can't get it. It gets more and more expensive as you add on.
It is, and I years ago you would pay $25 and get all the channels that they had, but now there are so many different choices and options and services. There's home phone, there's internet. Some companies offer wireless as well. So there's just so much on offer, and so much more communication that we do and entertainment that we have, that the prices have gone way, way, way up. And so I really sympathize people when it comes to that. It's really hard to, and it's hard to sort it all out too. This is not an easy thing.
This email just in from Tyler, who writes, I put an antenna up. I get crystal clear TV for free. With a streaming box Roku, I get even more. Tyler, thanks very much. It's Tyler in Victoria. How easy is that to do? Put up your own antenna and just take in your own content?
It's not really that hard at all. If you go to your local Best Buy or consumer electronics store, they'll show you how to do it. And you buy the gear, you find a good spot for it, and you're able to get whatever over-the-air signals you have. Now, it's a bit different, though, as you get farther away from the major centers. I'm not sure how far your signal goes, but if you're down in a valley somewhere, in sort of in the BC interior, you're not going to get a lot of over-the-air TV, like if any signals at all. So that can't really be a solution for folks that are away from the old-style TV transmitter.
We have a tweet from Peter who writes, traditional cable companies have to modernize. Fewer, better channels with Netflix or similar linked to the account for a discount. Well, there's an interesting model right there. What about Netflix? I mean, are customers loyal to a particular service today? Those that subscribe to Netflix, they stay with Netflix?
They're loyal to value for money. So Netflix has a huge library. And as long as that is the case, and as long as they keep bringing out original content that people like, people will still pay for it. And the media companies have come around to, like my own cable company, Cogeco, they offer Netflix on the box because they're realizing that the people who are paying for and watching Netflix are the big TV fans who also want to watch HBO and they want to subscribe to Game of Thrones. Now, the things that have changed from in the past where people would subscribe to, TMN or HBO and then stay subscribers, they're coming in and out when the popular shows are there because those are more expensive. You can pay $15 a month for TMN to get Game of Thrones. You watch it for the 3 months that it's on, and then you take it off your bill. So there's a lot more things that are happening now that didn't happen in the future that make it a bit more challenging for them. But yeah, I would like to see them come up with more creative marketing strategies. And Rogers did that this summer in Toronto, where they were offering people, certain bundles of content and then offering 6 months of Netflix for free as well.
Greg, so good to have you with us for this conversation. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Okay, that's Greg O'Brien. Greg O'Brien, editor and publisher of CART.ca. That's CARTT.ca. Great to have him with us.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts/podcasts/podcasts/podcasts/podcasts/podcasts/podcasts